Our second group of organisms, or kingdom, that we'll be working with is the protist kingdom, or kingdom protistae. And protist is known as, to me, the catch-all kingdom. And that's because this kingdom is highly diverse. So protist is basically any eukaryotic organism that is not a plant, animal, or fungi. So it's an organism made of eukaryotic cells that is not classified as a plant, animal, or fungus. So not one of those kingdoms. Protists can be multicellular, unicellular, autotrophic, heterotrophic, microscopic, macroscopic. They can be aerobic, anaerobic, and they can produce both asexually and sexually. Some 411 on on protists. They were the earliest eukaryotes on the evolutionary record. Again, they're any eukaryote that is not a plant, fungus, or animal. Mostly they are unicellular, but some are multicellular. We'll look at that. Most live in aquatic environments, so water, or in damp environments like the soil. There's over 50 phyla in this kingdom, again, highly diverse. And they're commonly referred to as plankton, protozoa, zooplankton. You'll hear these different names for them. So grouping your protists. We have three major groupings of protists. They can be plant-like, so have similar characteristics to that of plants. They can be animal-like, having similar characteristics to animal cells or animal organisms. And they can be fungal-like, so having similar characteristics to fungi. So starting with plant-like. This includes our algae and our diatoms. So green algae, or chlorophyta, is one large phyla. This group of protists is autotrophic, and they have chlorophyll, giving them a green color or a green pigment, and that's the pigment that's responsible for photosynthesis or energy production. Green algae mostly live in aquatic environments, fresh and marine water. Some do live in soil or sand or on other organisms as well, as long as it's damp. Most of these are unicellular and microscopic, so you can't actually see the individual cell or organism with your naked eye. But they do colonize into groups and form what you would see as like a sheath of green algae. Some marine species are multicellular, so they can get larger. They reproduce sexually and asexually, and they are the front runner of modern plants. So they're the evolutionary relative of modern plants. Then there's red algae, or rhodophyta. These are also autotrophic, but they have red pigments that actually mask the chlorophyll, making them look red in appearance. They are multicellular, so they aren't just a single cell. They form larger multicellular organisms. They have cellulose and agar in their cell wall. So that's that agar is that media we use to grow the bacteria. So the base for that actually comes from red algae. These mostly live in warm marine environments, so warm oceans, tropics. And actually all but 200 of about 10,000 species live in warmer waters. They can live at deeper depths than the green relatives due to these pigments that have a better ability to absorb light. They can also grow on surfaces of rocks or corals, and we call this coralline algae. It's just one of the many species of red algae. You can see some of this in our fish tank. And red algae is also commonly used in food productions and probiotics for humans. Brown algae. So brown algae is also autotrophic. It's known as phyophyta. Again, it has brown pigments instead of green ones, so this masks the chlorophyll. It's darker. They're multicellular, so they consist of many cells in their organisms. They actually live in the cooler, rockier shoreline marine environments, so northern Pacific and northern Atlantic coasts. A good example of this would be the California kelp beds, the very large and tall brown algae that grows offshore of Northern California. They have cellulose in their cell walls, and they can get very large, up to about 100 meters in length. This algae actually has cells that are specialized, so its multicellular nature allows some of its cells to have different jobs. So some jobs that cells have can be for anchorage or holding it to the ocean floor. Others are for support, making its long leaf structure. And then some cells are strictly responsible for photosynthesis. Diatoms is another form of plant-like protist. They also are autotrophic, and they have pigments that mask the chlorophyll. It's a red-brown color. You can see these all over the fish tank walls. They are unicellular, and they have this actual like silicone shell, so it gives it a little bit of a protective outer coating. They can form colonies, that's why you see large brown streaks across the tank, not dots. And they mostly live in aquatic, fresh and marine environments. And they can thrive in very damp environments too, though, like wet rocks and rainforests. Some can actually move by gliding or sliding, and they can reproduce asexually and sexually. The silica or the silicone from their little shells, when they die, actually contributes to the sand and sediment layer in the ocean. Protozoans. These are our animal-like protists. So they have more animal-like characteristics like movement and being more macroscopic. We can see these sometimes with our naked eye. Examples of protozoans are flagellates, sarcodines, sporozoans, and ciliates. These are the major phyla. So flagellates, this includes various phyla. They're mostly heterotrophic and unicellular. They move by means of flagella, hence their name. They live in aquatic or damp environments and usually live in symbiosis with other organisms. Here you can see some images of them. So dinoflagellates. These are another phyla of flagellates, more specifically dinoflagellata. They are photosynthetic, so they use the sun to make their energy, and they live in marine environments specifically, so in the ocean. They can produce toxins that are harmful to humans, and they're responsible for these phenomena we know as red tides. So these algae overgrow due to some imbalance in the environment and create this red sheath on the top of an ocean. Sarcodines is another grouping of protozoans, and it includes various phyla. We commonly refer to these guys as amoebas. So these are single-celled organisms that are living in aquatic or damp environments and can live symbiotically within other organisms. They reproduce asexually, so cell division, and they move and feed using what we know as pseudopods, so these projections or finger-like extensions of their cellular mass. So they throw out these fingers, they grab onto something, and they pull the rest of their mass over. Some of them have calcium carbonate shells, which, like their relatives, the diatoms, can contribute to the sediment layer when they die. So sporozoans is another phyla falling under animal-like protists. They form spores or little seeds that have reproduced organisms of themselves. They're parasitic, so they feed off hosts or other organisms. They use sexual reproduction to form gametes or cysts. And they have no movement or self-propulsion, so they rely on their hosts to get them from place to place. And their life cycle involves several hosts, so they don't just live in one organism their whole lives, they move from organism to organism. We also have ciliates, which are the most complex and specialized of all the protists. They actually have two distinct nuclei with genetic information. Most are unicellular and free-living in aquatic environments, so they float around doing their thing, and they move by means of their cilia or their finger-like projections. They're also heterotrophic, so they need to consume their food. Molds are our fungal-like protists. So we have slime molds, our Myxomycota, and these exist as a stream of cytoplasm. They have no true cell wall or a definite form. They can be fairly large, spreading up to 1 meter in length, and they form spores for their reproduction. They generally live in damp environments with decaying plant matter as they are decomposers. Another group of slime molds is the Acrocyomycota. These are cellular, so they have a cell wall. They resemble the sarcodines that we just talked about in the animal-like protists. Generally, they function independently or living unicellular on their own, but in stressful conditions, they can form colonies and work together for survival. Again, they live in damp environments with decaying matter as they function as decomposers. Water molds is another phyla of fungal-like protists and is known as Omycota. These water molds, white rusts, or mildews, and they also grow on dead matter or in host organisms, so they feed off of decomp. And they can reproduce asexually and sexually. So that does it for our protists for today. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw.